We're going to start talking about color and color theory. Now, when we talk about color, another word for color is hues. And then everybody thinks that black and white are colors also, but we consider them to be values. Okay, now, there's three primary colors. And those primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. And then we have three secondary colors. And those colors are in between. That's your green, your orange, and your violet. And then you have tertiary colors. And that's the third stage. And those are the ones in between. That would be like your yellow-orange, your red-orange, your red-violet, your blue-violet, your blue-green, and your yellow-green. So those are your tertiary colors. So let's look at the color wheel. And I'm going to show you some examples of maybe some good things that you can think about, a few things to watch out for, and we'll start from there. So let's talk a little bit about the color wheel. There's 12 individual pie shapes, and when you start, I suggest that you just pick a random place and put an R for red, count 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A B for blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a Y for yellow. Now, as you paint, that makes sure that you don't accidentally go one too far or one too less and suddenly have not enough space for your other colors. It doesn't matter where you start or where you put them. They can go one direction or the other, just as long as the spacing is correct. Now, as you paint, I like to leave a slight little halo in between. And the reason I do that is because I want to work quickly. And if I'm going along and the two colors that I'm painting touch and they're both wet, they'll start to bleed back and forth. And that makes a big mess on your color wheel. So by painting and leaving a slight barrier there, I end up with that nice little stripe of white, and that works out fairly well. Now, as we look at this, the value chart, there's 4 rectangles on each side that are 3/4 of an inch wide, with this one being an inch wide in the middle. And this is where you're going to take and put your original color, and then you're going to add water to it on one side and come up with a value scale where it gets progressively lighter. On this side, we're going to add just a touch of black, and each time a little darker until the last color looks almost black or dark, but there's still a hint of the original color that you can see in it. This one was done with sap green, and so you can see how it progressively gets lighter, progressively gets darker. This one was done with crimson, and so once again, a little bit darker, until this one's almost black, but I can still see a hint of the crimson. Going this direction, the opposite. This one was done with phthalo blue, and I would caution you about this a little bit because as it gets dark so quickly that it's very, very hard to see the difference between these two. This one's almost black, although I can see a hint of blue in it. Going this way, it's much easier to go light. So if you're going to use the blue, let this one be just a little bit lighter here, and that'll give you a better range as you go towards the darks. Now, this student decided to wash out her colors a little bit, so they're much lighter, but that is fine. And then once again, she used crimson, went darker and lighter, and that worked out just fine. Now, let me show you a few of the things to watch out for. When you're working, try to be neat. As long as the colors are proper, the value chart is proper, you'll still get a good grade, but you'll get a higher grade if it's at least neat. Same thing here. Now they wrote the colors around. They wrote every one. You know, the yellow orange, the orange, the red orange, which is fine. Go ahead and erase them when you're done. That would also be fine. But just try to be a little bit neater as you're doing your value scale and your color wheel. Now this is a problem that I talked about before. As we look at this, there's a color progression here that's getting lighter, but boy, you come this direction and I can't tell the difference between these last three and almost the last four. They're just dark. This one here, same problem. This was one of the greens, vermilion, I think. And these two are too close together. These two are too close together. These two are too close together. You want to have a progression. The other thing is they painted everything on so thick that it lost all its transparency. And so we want to have the paper showing through the paint to some degree, and that's what gives it its brightness. Once again, try to be neat. Don't outline things in black. Don't make your paint so thick that they're almost, that they are opaque. And just try to be a little bit more neat. Okay, to expedite things, make it a little bit easier for everyone, since we're not in the classroom, I decided that I would draw out everyone's value scale and their color wheel. And so each of you should have in your packet a piece of paper, watercolor paper, that has these light lines on it. Be sure to use it for this and not for something else. I suggest that you start with two primary colors, and you'll color those in, and also, just as I mentioned before, go ahead and mark on the paper, blue, yellow, red. Just put a letter there for those. And then you'll paint the colors in between. And then eventually you'll finish them out. And I'll talk about the value scale in a moment. Let's talk for a moment about our brushes and our materials. Everyone in their packet should have 3 brushes. This is a 1-inch flat, this is a number 6 round, and a number 1 or 2 round. Okay? Now you want to take good care of your brushes. They can be very expensive. Just for a student grade, these can be $12 to $15 for this brush, and $7 or $8 for this, and $3 for the little small one. And so you want to take good care of them because they're expensive to replace. One of the ways to take care of them is all the students always want to just put their brushes in their water and just let them sit there. Well, what that does is it bends the bristles, and so eventually that's going to break the stems of the bristles. So once you put them in, get them wet, take your paper towel or your tissue and dry them off. And then you can set them down. Now when you're ready to actually wash them out, the way that we wash them out is you take a little bit of either hand soap or dish soap, put it in your palm, and get your brush nice and wet, and then you rub it around that, and you'll see the color coming out of the bristles. Now, when you rinse that off and do it a couple times, and there's no more color coming, then you know that the brush is clean. We also want to make sure that we're only using warm to cold water. The bristles are held in with a glue, and if you use hot water, you can actually melt the glue and you'll start to lose your bristles. Now the other thing that I want to talk about is the colors that we want to use. Now in the packets that you received, you have 2 blues, 2 reds, and 2 yellows. This is a lemon yellow. This is the one I suggest that you use. The other lemon or the other yellow has a little bit of orange in it, so it makes it tough when you start trying to make greens, turns them a little bit to mud. And so lemon yellow, this is called Brilliant Red, and then this is Ultramarine Blue. And even though I really like the phthalo blue, it has a little bit of green to it, and so it's not good when you start doing the purples, the violets. Now, one way of doing this is taking your palette and make sure it's clean, and you want to put one of your primary colors in a thing, count 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have your second one. And so I've already painted the blue and the yellow on the paper, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yellow and move it into here, a little bit of it. Now, when you're mixing colors, you always want to start with the lightest value and mix in the darkest value. Now, when you look at yellow and blue, blue has a lot more intensity to it as far as light and dark. Yellow is a very light value. And so if I start with blue and try to add a yellow into it to make, let's say, a yellow-green, man, I'm going to have a huge pile of pigment. Whereas if I start with yellow, I just put little dabs of blue in, pretty soon I'll have what I want. So I start with yellow. I want to add water. These are tubes of paint. So unlike the cakes that you had, most of you had in grade school where you add the water to it and it's stiff, this comes out soft, so you don't have to add quite as much water to it. We'll get this mixed up. Now, once again, we don't want to have the paint so thick that you can't see the paper through. You know, we don't want it to look opaque. So I'm going to mix a little bit of blue in there. And that is looking a little bit like the yellow-green that I'm trying to achieve. So I'm going to leave that there for a moment. Now I'm going to take some more yellow, add a little bit of water to it. Okay, now I'm going to take more of the blue, start to add it in. And now I'm going to try to get a darker green. And that's getting there, but it's not quite as dark as what I would like. So I'm going to add a little bit more blue to it. Now that's looking pretty good, I think. Now before I go on, I'm going to take my yellow. Put it there, and I've run out of yellow a little bit, so I need to add just a touch more. And now I'm trying to create my blue-green. So I'll take my blue. And right now it's not very different from my other greens, so I keep adding little amounts of blue in. And that's getting there. Add just a touch more. By mixing them all at once, I can figure out what the colors need to be before I put them on the paper. And so now I'll start with my yellow-green. And remember, I want to leave just a slight line in between each one. Oops. And this is a process that shouldn't take too long. Once you get painting, you want to be efficient and fairly quick, because as soon as it starts to dry, then you end up with a line. Okay, so I'll wash off my brush, dry it out. Now I'm going to go to the green. Come right along the edge of that line. Now by leaving that little white line in between, then the paints don't mix back and forth, and that's my goal. Now, if you're getting a lot of brush marks like I am right now, you can add a little bit of water to it, and that'll help spread everything around. Okay, clean off my brush, dry it off a little bit. And now I'm going to move on to my blue-green. Okay, so this process is then repeated with the oranges and the violets. The violets are probably the toughest to get because there are some, oh, I won't call them impurities, but the colors aren't exactly perfect. And so sometimes the violets look a little muddy, but don't worry, just keep painting away and do the best that you can. But by mixing them all together, or all at once, in the 3 depressions in your palette, that means that you pretty well created the colors that you want before you ever put them down. And that just makes it a lot easier. Okay? So, this is stage 1. Okay, so now I've done the violets, I've done, we did the greens before, and now we're just starting to finish up the reds and the oranges. And so what I've done is I started with the lightest one, it was the lightest value, and I then went on to the red and mixed them all up, and now I'm going for the red the red orange. And so have to make sure that it's not too close to the red. This one is a little bit close, but it's still on the orange side. Now, one of the things that's important when you change from one set of related colors to another set of related colors to the third set, you always want to make sure that you change out your water. I've watched students whose water looks like mud. And of course, you're not going to get good clean colors if you have dirty water. So make sure that you take time to switch out your water every time it starts to get dark or every time you switch to a different set of related colors. Now, what are related colors? Related colors are the ones that are next to each other. And so oranges are all related to the reds and the yellows. Violets are all related to the reds and the blues. And greens are all related to the yellows and the blues. Okay, now if you have, let's pick 3 colors. Let's do the oranges. 1, 2, 3. Now the one that's in the middle is the orange, and it has an opposite color. And that color is, you go right through the color wheel, blue. If you take the 3 violets, come to violet, the opposite color is yellow. If you take the 3 greens, and the opposite color, see, 1, 2, 3, will then be red. Okay? And so it's sometimes called a complementary color or the opposite color, but it means the same thing. And so quite often, if you have a composition, if you have 3 related colors plus the opposite, then that creates a nice harmony and contrast at the same time. So this is your first assignment, is to create a color wheel using only 3 colors. You can only use those colors, you need to mix them, and that'll teach you a lot about color theory. And then the value chart we're going to take care of on the next video.